All right, big deal, small deal, or no deal. Ronnie Bell today dropped 2 punts. Is it a big deal that he dropped 2 punts? Is it a small deal? Is it no big deal at all?
I would say it's a small deal. I mean, he didn't look great returning punts, last year, so it's not a huge surprise. But you know, they need to have an answer at punt returner, and it's not promising. It's like you gotta convince me that someone can do it, and maybe it's like Jacob Cowing. We'll see, but it's a small deal. It's not nothing. I'm not that concerned about it. But I'm not like feeling enthused for the 49ers about the possibility of Ronnie Bell returning punts.
I think it's kind of a big deal because Ronnie Bell has got to show he's not a burner. He's not a big receiver. He's not a guy that you can just say, Chris Conley, you can play him on coverage units. He's a bigger, faster, more physical athlete. Ronnie Bell's got to be the sure-handed guy. I
Yeah.
mean, him and Trent Taylor are got to be sure-handed. If Trent Taylor's dropping balls, he's cut. If Ronnie Bell is dropping balls, he's cut. So to me, I think it's a big deal. I think it's a big deal for Ronnie Bell. I think Ronnie Bell's got to almost be perfect because he's got to earn the trust of this team,
Yeah.
the special teams unit, coordinator, Schneider, Shanahan. The one thing that they have an abundance of options, it's return men. Do you want Garendo? You got him. You want, Ronnie Bell? You got him. You want Trent Taylor? You got him. You got speeds guys like Danny Gray. You've got running backs with speed like Garendo. You've got, running backs who are sure-handed like Cody Schrader. You got Juice himself, who's a fullback, who's very sure-handed. So, I mean, if you're Ronnie Bell and you're not a burner, man, you better catch the ball. And he didn't today.
Yep.
So I would say it's a big deal. Another thing I thought was kind of interesting. No Greenlaw. The starting 2 linebackers were Warner and Devondre Campbell. When they went to a 3 linebacker 4-3 look, the third linebacker was Curtis Robinson. What did you make of that? So their starting 3 linebackers are Fred Warner, Devondre Campbell, and Curtis Robinson, ahead of Bethune, ahead of Winters, ahead of Graham. I was shocked by that.
It didn't surprise me. I mean, you remember you go back to, I want to say it was 2 years ago. Curtis Robinson was like a surprise guy that they used an extra roster spot on to get onto the roster, and then they put him on IR, but they like made an effort to make sure they could keep him. So they liked him from the start. He hasn't shown a ton, but he's got a great frame. I think I'm pretty sure I've seen them rep him at middle linebacker behind behind Warner, learning from him. So it's not like a huge surprise, because he's a guy that's, no one's going to be like, ooh, is this the next guy? I think it's just somebody who's been in the system for a while. They don't want to give anything to some of these young players, without them really earning it. And also it allows, Winters and Graham to sort of figure it out on their own in the second unit. So I think it's mildly interesting, but I'm not that shocked by it.
Herm Edwards told John Lynch that Ricky Pearsall is the kind of football personality where he overworks.
Yeah.
And that you've got to protect him from him. And that, the hamstring injury that he has now, it's like things like that where you got to almost protect him from him. It's good to know for sure. There are guys who just, spend too much time in the batting cage, too much BP, too much practice. I mean, I'll say this. I mean, there have been times when I've done radio shows where I get a half hour into the show and I'm like, I over prepared.
Yeah.
I over prepared for the show. And that's not good either because you just want to get so much information out there that you're
Right.
not, it's like you over
You're not
prepared
being
for
as
the show.
present. Yeah. You're not
Yeah,
listening the way you should. Yeah.
you're not having a conversation with Jake Hutchinson. You're now putting out all kinds of points that you wanted to put out, and they're good points,
Right.
which is because you did all the research. But it's sometimes, I'm the kind of person that, let's say I'm doing a pregame show, I keep adding and adding and adding and adding and adding and adding and adding. I never subtract.
Oh, Larry,
So,
I spent the last few months like writing a book, and it just kept fucking going and going. Excuse my language, kept going and going and going, and it just ended up at like 500 some pages. And it's just like you keep adding, you keep adding. You're like, I have to stop at some point, but you get addicted to it, and you just can't stop. You're like, this is all so good, I got to keep going.
and Pearsall is that kind of guy where it sounds like he just is
Yeah,
running routes and running routes and running routes. And according to Herm, he says he told Lynch, "Hey man, this guy will overwork, and you got to protect him from himself, and you got to hold him off a little bit." And
I
I mean,
mean,
you'd rather have that. You know what? This guy works way too
yeah.
hard, and you got to slow him down. Then this guy doesn't work at all, and you got to go hunt him down and drive him to the facility. And it's like he doesn't want to be here. I mean, that's a bigger problem, but this is also a problem because it's a long year. I mean, you're showing up for camp around the middle of July. If everything goes right, you're still playing in the middle of February.
Yep.
It's a long year.
Yeah, I think with it doesn't shock me at all about Pearsall. I mean, the amount of training he does, like visibly, and you just watched in OTAs, he was at a different pace from everybody else. He's going like McCaffrey, right? He's going 100% all of the time. And I think there is an art to that of like, you actually can't, that's not sustainable. So, I wonder if him being around McCaffrey and some of those other guys who are just actually obsessed with working. Like, I think McCaffrey's genuinely the guy he could learn from the most in that respect. And like, how do you manage this desire to be on all the time and sharpen yourself up all the time without overdoing it? I think that is something that way better than the alternative, but it is something that coming to the NFL, he's going to have to learn. And I think he'll be all right. Just he's a freak athlete, works super hard on himself, so I think his body will recover. But um, it's definitely a concern. It's not nothing.
But
Yeah.
three rookies to me, if you wanted to say, okay, what's been the most meaningful revelation of the first couple of days? Okay, we could talk about the holdouts, and we already have. But then it's three rookies. It's Garendo with the hamstring injury, but before the hamstring injury, he looked amazing. It's Malik Mustafa, who had one of the most savage interceptions I think I've ever seen. And then Jacob Cowing, who's running around and just looks terrific. Ball skills, speed, really good footwork, really good balance. He just looks like a guy who's just ready to contribute, like not like in a year or later this year, but like week one. He just looks like a guy who's ready to contribute right away. So to me, those three rookies really, really stood out. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, you're a little bit more sold on Cowing than I am, but I saw he also just hasn't been that involved, and I got to see him, with pads on, what he looks like against NFL players. Because whenever I see a guy who's smaller than me, I have questions. I think it's
Right.
fair. Like I think about if I was out there, I would die. So when I see Cowing out there, granted he's got crazy speed, great measurable, super shifty. I need to see it. But today on a swing pass, he just scooted down the sideline, uh, and you're like, oh, it's like 10 yards off a little swing pass in the blink of an eye. So I've been impressed with that. Mustafa has obviously been great. Talked about him before. I just think safety is a position that has the biggest variance on this team. It could be a major weakness for them, or it could be a sneaky good position where all of a sudden you can run three safety big nickel with Mustafa, Jair Brown, and have Hufanga basically like the prime version of Jamal Adams, where he's a safety, but he's really a blitzing linebacker. Like, I think that in an ideal world, if all those three guys are firing and you got Brandon Staley dialing it up, you got a really interesting safety group with a lot of physicality, a lot of juice. I think that's the ideal for the 49ers. And then Garendo, it's a bummer because I think he's a guy who really needs reps. I think
Yeah.
he's super raw. Even after all the time he spent in college, I'm not sure he really knows how to play the running back position, naturally. But you give him the ball in space, and he's like a monster. He's a long, fast strider who's like muscled up. I think he'd be the perfect kick returner for them with his new kick return rules. We talked about that before. So if they don't have that, um, we'll see how long he's out. But if it's a hamstring injury, it's going to cost him a few weeks. And with a guy who's that explosive, it's a concern. It could end up like a Cam Latu PUP situation where just because of numbers, he doesn't really get a chance this year, and it's a huge bummer. I think they want to avoid that and see what he has because he's so explosive, and they probably want to avoid that at all costs. But we'll see.